Welcome to the Evolvepreneur Podcast Channel. Today's special guest is Tamar Hela, who is an entrepreneur based in Shanghai and COO of the digital marketing agency Genius Encel. I think I've pronounced that right. She helps Fortune 500 companies in Asia generate leads through LinkedIn. As co-president of the LinkedIn Local Asia, Tamara has created a network of communities made up of LinkedIn lovers, embracing the original idea of LinkedIn Local, getting to know the person behind the profile. She has also founded LinkedIn Local Shanghai Community, which has 3,000 members, making one of the largest professional active networks in China. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, John. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be on your show.
Cool. And so, interesting with LinkedIn, I started LinkedIn probably, like everybody, like probably 10 years ago, whatever it started, and did bugger all with it. And then I started doing some local networking. So I'd go to networking functions and I'd try to, make some sales. And what I realised was they couldn't afford me. And so that come pretty quick after I did a couple of quotes. So I thought, okay, what can I do? And then I sort of thought about LinkedIn. I thought, I might just try and find some local Sydney kind of customers. And then it just dawned on me for some bizarre reason, and I don't even know why you wouldn't, but I thought, hang on, the whole world's here. I don't just need to talk to someone in Sydney or Australia. I can go anywhere I like. And to this day, probably 80% of my business is now in either the US or some other country. So I rarely do business in Australia. It's like you can't be a prophet in your own town, right? And so it was an interesting way to kind of grow a business. So we started, I've had about 500, LinkedIn connections. I think I'm sitting at about 23,000 now. And that took about 3 or 4 years of hard slog. So LinkedIn's probably my primary way of generating business. So it's great to talk to you today because it's a really good subject. And I think most people look at LinkedIn and their eyes glaze over and they like the sound of it, but they're just not quite sure what to do with it, right?
Yes, that's correct. And I love that you said 80% because I think that's a good ratio, the 80-20, Pareto principle. And that's actually how our CEO, my business partner, got started with LinkedIn. At the time, he was generating also 80% of his business through LinkedIn, which caused him to shift his digital agency from e-commerce into LinkedIn services. And that's why we're doing what we're doing today. 100% of my business, of course, comes from LinkedIn because that's what I do. But it's such a great platform, and it naturally kind of filters people the way that Instagram or Facebook or Twitter just can't. So I'm really pleased to hear that it's also been successful for you.
So in China, is any of the social media platforms like banned or prevented? Like I would have thought Facebook would be one that I didn't know whether they can do Facebook in China. I know that some Asian countries Facebook's banned, but
that is definitely a common question I get being in China. The truth is all Western social media is banned or blocked except for LinkedIn.
Right.
Even LinkedIn China side, there's a few restrictions, but they're not a particularly big deal. But that's what makes LinkedIn so special as well. And that's why we're involved in that particular social media platform, because it's allowed here without using a VPN.
God, okay, right. And so would you happen to know how many Chinese users that are using LinkedIn in comparison to, say, the rest of the world? Like, is it? I would imagine it's a fairly big user count then. Like Australia has quite a big user count apparently on LinkedIn as well.
Correct. So in Australia, you guys actually get some cool features before lots of people get them. Like, I think you guys got to try LinkedIn stories before other people did, which is pretty cool. But yes, it's huge in Australia, which is amazing. LinkedIn China currently is the third user base in the world. And in the next 12 months or less, it's projected that it's actually going to be number one.
Wow.
Because more and more Chinese companies especially are looking to globalize or at least get some kind of international expansion or opportunity. And they know that LinkedIn is really powerful. So if they have the right tools, if they're marketing in the right way, if they know how to approach international clients using their language or just using English, then for them it's a really powerful tool. Currently, I believe there's about I could be a little off, but maybe about 65 or 66 million users in China on LinkedIn compared to about 160 million in the US. So they're going to catch up really soon. And out of that 65, 66 million users in China, 5.15 million are actual like big time decision makers. They're usually educated from abroad, and then they return to China and they become executives and CEOs or business owners who are actively using LinkedIn every day. So it's quite special, and it's very, very relevant in the Chinese business landscape.
Right.
Really interesting.
And I was going to say with LinkedIn, from my experience is that people, it's interesting enough, people freely give up a lot of information on LinkedIn that they wouldn't give up on Facebook, for starters. So really the person you look on Facebook's got very little information, because Facebook doesn't really care too much about your basic information. They've already got that. They care more about what you like and what you do. So whereas LinkedIn is, from what I can see, is always about that profile page, right? Because that's really the trick to the thing. If you've got a decent profile page, then you've got a chance. Whereas people rarely look at people's profile pages, say in something like Facebook or something like that, right?
Correct. And I think that's a good point that most people forget, that they don't bring up. And you can look at it in one way first. First, think about on Facebook, we are the products. So anything we do kind of goes. And that's why it's not as interesting to look at someone's profile on Facebook. It's more checking out the home feed or groups or videos or what have you. Whereas LinkedIn, they have products. And people choose to use them or they don't choose to use them. However, when people are going to do business with someone, of course, LinkedIn would be the first stop. If you're looking up a business, Google will rank LinkedIn higher than anything when you're doing a search for someone, and it brings you straight to the person's profile page. It's basically a modern day landing page that in some regards has taken away the need that you had maybe 10 years ago for a perfect website. Websites are definitely still relevant, of course, for businesses, and they provide a lot of great features and functions. But now, most people, to even see if they can have a sense of what you do, what you offer, or create trust or the initial rapport, they're going to look at your LinkedIn. And so that's why, when people really are thinking about their profiles, it must be optimized. It's something that we really help people do, because again, like I said, it's like your modern day landing page. And if your value proposition or your offer is not clearly understood in the first 3 seconds, then people are going to leave and go to your competitor or somewhere else. So that's, I think, the biggest differences as far as social media usage between Facebook and LinkedIn.
And I think the thing is too, people have got to remember that LinkedIn isn't your resume as such, unless you're looking to be recruited, right? So at the end of the day, you got to think like a marketer. I think with LinkedIn, I think you got to think of that top line area where they look at and decide whether the photo that you put up really is going to be decent enough, or the headline you're putting up. So I think that's the thing. You've really got to look at it as a marketing tool, not just a rank name and serial number kind of thing, right? So I think that's where a lot of people don't do. I notice a lot of people, that haven't really looked at it in their LinkedIn as classic mistakes. I think one of the ones I spot every time is I go there and I try and contact them and their website's not in their contact details.
Correct. And again, that's another great point you bring up. It's not just your online CV, nor if you are looking for a job, should you treat it that way. Everyone must think like a marketer these days. That's why LinkedIn is so special. That's why people need to understand that we are going through this digital renaissance, is what I like to call it, especially during this special year with, the unexpected surprises the whole world got. Everything is online. The attention is higher than ever online. And if people don't think like a marketer or think about the best way to sell themselves even for a job, then their competition is going to leave them in the dust. So something that's been interesting, because I recently had a chat with the president of LinkedIn China. He and his team were sharing with us that this year in particular, the biggest increase on LinkedIn China side was that there were more job seekers than anything, of course, which we're not surprised about. And so part of the challenge for LinkedIn China, especially to get more Chinese people using LinkedIn properly and getting better results, is teaching them how to optimize their profile or use it in the correct way, how to reach out to potential employers, how to pitch them, just like you would pitch your services or products as a business. So that's definitely something, you know, everyone needs to think like a marketer these days, because competition online is fiercer than ever. And there's a lot going on. So people need to take a step back and really think things through. It's not like 10 years ago.
Yeah, moving fast. I think that too was interesting. I was watching a new movie out called Social Dilemma, and it was talking about a lot about Facebook, and I think they touched on LinkedIn, but they probably kept away from it. But one of the things that they said was interesting, and it's always been, if you're not paying for the product, you're the product, right? And I think in LinkedIn, that's a bit blurry, because at the end of the day with LinkedIn, you've got different levels of LinkedIn. You've got the free levels, and then you've got the paid levels. So in some respects, I think their methodology isn't that you're the product, you're the customer. And at least you can get some tech support when you want some questions answered. I can tell you, like a couple of times I've approached them and they've come back to me and answered questions. It's like you, and you know, the likes of like Facebook, Instagram, you've got good luck getting anybody. So I think that's one of the important things, is they are probably not treating you like a product. They're treating you more like a customer.
That's correct. Yeah. And I think that's why people like that, because again, like even for business, if we're traveling, we expect the airlines to treat us like the kings and queens. If we hire, you know, for services and delegate some activities for our business to an agency, we expect them to treat us well, because we're the customers. And when you don't get that from platforms like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, then anything goes. But when you have that respect for the customer, again, that is what makes LinkedIn special, because of course too, they want to sell their services, their premium products. So they have to have a different approach and philosophy than other social media platforms would have. That's a great point.
So, you know, and like one of the things that I've noticed in LinkedIn, and people don't realize, I think, and they're probably in other platforms a similar thing, but in LinkedIn it's probably more so, is that there are limits to what you can do, right? So if it's at a free level, you can only do so much, and each level is limits. And I think that's probably a good thing and a bad thing, because sometimes you can break those limits without realizing them. But I think they're a little bit more. So do you know much about the limits of how many messages you can do and how many profiles you can view and stuff like that in terms of that? Because I think that's one thing. People dive into LinkedIn, don't realize they've got to pay for an upgrade, and then they suddenly get themselves banned or prevented to do stuff, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yes, that's a very good question. Both my business partner and I, we consider ourselves practitioners. We would never offer LinkedIn services or solutions to people without figuring things out ourselves. So even to this very day, yesterday, we were testing things out, testing the limits. So that helps us to train our staff, and that's what we circumvent using the free version with our team. But of course, when we take a client on, for example, we encourage them to get a subscription to Sales Navigator. Sales Navigator is really special because you do have higher limits, but there's still limits as far as invitations you can send. And depending on the plan you get, let's say somebody doesn't accept your connection request, but you really want to get in touch with them, you can use the in-mail feature, and you have a certain amount of credits. So that's a great way to kind of send a cold email without violating privacy terms. People can set their privacy settings for that. If you're searching for a job too, there's particular limits, but if you get like the job search product, then the limits, a lot of the limits are lifted. In the free version, we found that it's best to keep what the invites that you send, maybe 50 or under per day. And then if you keep sending many, many messages, this is a little secret hack I'll share. The problem is if they don't get accepted, LinkedIn will automatically put a cap on you sending invites, period. Because if people aren't active and you have all these invitations, the algorithm, the AI might think that you're a spam bot. So it's important for people to go into their network and their invitations area. They need to look at all the invitations that they've sent if they're running into this problem, and they need to withdraw invitations, and I would keep it between anywhere from 200 to 400 active invitations that you sent. Any more than that, it can get to dangerous limitation territory on LinkedIn. So definitely, yeah, things like that. But like I said, like if you stick within those limits per day and you're doing all the activities yourself, I think the free version is great. But depending on what people want, what their goals are, I also believe the premium products are wonderful too. I use it myself, so for me it's definitely
a good investment.
value.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's like maybe it's $100 a month, or depends on what you look at.
Correct.
But if you're paying that amount of money and you're using it, then you're getting some value out of it. If you're paying the money and you're not using it, well, different story. And I think one of the areas that Sales Navigator is quite an unusual kind of thing, because it's almost like there's two LinkedIns.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like you've got this other world. It's like this is a whole different world, a whole different kind of set of features. And it's kind of bizarre when you first look at it, because you realize there's actually two message boxes, and there's all these things that sort of open up a whole new vista of things that you can find. And I think where the areas that I always have trouble with LinkedIn was trying to find the right sort of people, and the risk factor is if you sit there and you start clicking like crazy and start connecting as many people as you like, you can end up with a lot of trouble, and then suddenly you can't understand why things aren't working for you because you've actually gone over limits, and then they've either blocked you or they're starting to like just stop that stuff. And I mean, I get a lot of
exactly.
I get a lot. Yeah, the other interesting thing I get too, and I think that's probably we can talk about is the messaging process that people go through. What happens to me is sometimes you connect to people, particularly like probably Asian, kind of Indian, and Middle Eastern to a degree. You'll get a lot of people from SEO and stuff, and then they'll send you this ginormous message, which is so long. On mobile, it's really long. And I think what annoys me is I feel like I'm replying back, which I don't want to start the conversation, but I feel like I'm replying back and saying, do you think this actually works? If you think you send someone a massive message like that, they're actually going to pay any attention to what you just said. Like you don't go to someone in a networking environment and then blurb out endlessly for the next 20 minutes, if you get that long with them, even if they walk off on you, to talk about that sort of thing. You've only got that, a few seconds, few minutes tops, they're going to pay attention to you. So
exactly. Well, nowadays, sadly, but honestly, people's attention spans are shorter than that of a goldfish.
Yeah.
A goldfish is 9 seconds, and people's is like 8 seconds. And you and I, before we started recording, we were talking about Dean Graziosi, who I'm a huge fan of, and you got to interview. I think he has like a particular 4 pillar structure, which I like for these messages. And I think that people should follow it. I think it starts with something like an attention grabber, which is very important in any kind of marketing or getting people's attention, because we're always fighting for attention. The next one is like some kind of idea or a problem, a projection you want to make. Next is the storytelling to amplify, I think, that kind of idea or the problem. And then the final thing is the call to action, which basically the call to action is going to guarantee that you're going to solve the problem if you take the action. So if people remember those kind of structures, and they're not just sending this long thing. Even just yesterday, I got a message, ironically, from a LinkedIn agency, a LinkedIn services agency in Europe. And first of all, they obviously didn't target well, because it's very clear on my profile what I do and my value proposition. So they shouldn't be targeting
trying to sell you
so they're trying to sell me a LinkedIn masterclass, which I run over here in Asia. And it was super, super long. It was hard to read. I also tell people use like a blogging style where you're doing space between each line, because people's brains, it actually tricks your brain if you have that space to keep reading. So you will read something long if your brain thinks it's not long. But all the things they were offering me were chunked in big text and paragraphs. And they also used really what I call fancy words rather than simple words to make it really straightforward. And it's not that people are dumb, but like we said, people don't want to pay attention that much. They don't have time, or they're just not interested. And if you use really fancy words that is going to make their brain think too much, it actually tells your middle brain that the prefrontal cortex doesn't need to pay attention. And then it goes to the lizard brain, and then it never gets paid attention
Makes
to.
It right.
So people need to understand that there's like this psychology about it as well. That's why I love Dean Graziosi's structure. It's brilliant and it's relevant.
Makes sense, yeah. And I think the thing is that people, I think they forget that generally speaking, there's someone else at the other end of that message. So you're talking to a human being. You're not talking to a robot. You're not trying to get a robot to do something. You're actually talking to a human being. And I think the danger is that if you, like you see, that's a great piece of advice about using big words, because I think some people try to feel important by using big words and it doesn't work. And the other thing too, I think, is that double spacing idea. That's interesting. I hadn't really thought of that, but I mean, that's, I think the thing is you got to think about who you're talking to, and start that conversation. And I think I always think about like networking. When I'm going up to someone talking in a networking environment, would they have listened to you if you said something? And we used to have an elevator pitch that said, "What do you do?" And I used to say, "We can help someone become an international best-selling author in as little as 90 days without writing a single word." Now I can say that pretty quick because I have a bit of practice, right? But if I can't get someone and then turn around and say, "What's that? What do you do?" then I've got a bad elevator pitch. And I think that's the thing that people don't feel, is that you've got to actually get their attention to start with. And yeah, I think we're getting very good at scrolling now. Like, people are very good at scrolling past stuff and processing stuff really quick. And so I think you've got to, it's a good way to try and stand out from the crowd, right?
Definitely. I mean, again, though, too, people's favorite subject to talk about is themselves. And if you can ask them a simple question before you get into things and create a rapport, if you ask them how they are, that's already doing more than what most people are doing. But I think it's also good to get straight to the point and definitely make, so to speak, your elevator pitch. It's all about that storytelling piece that Dean talks about, and that's something that we like to use for ourselves, we like to use for our clients, because a story also helps people pay attention. As soon as you hear the phrase "once upon a time," our brains are so wired to receive stories that we start to light up and we start to lean in and pay attention. So that's what we want to do with attention grabbers. That's what we want to do with our elevator pitch. There's even nowadays, if you know the book To Sell is Human, there's one particular part that talks about your pitch. And one of my favorite parts was actually the one-word pitch. That when you brand yourself, when you put messages out, it should be so strong that when people look at you, they think of one thing. So for me, obviously, when people look at me, I want them just to only think about LinkedIn. So when I think about that, I'm going to be very careful how I craft my message, and I'm not going to dilute it with fluff, fancy words, and things just talking about me. I want to tell people I have a solution for them, and they're going to find it through LinkedIn.
And it's interesting, actually, because when we do books for people, one of the things is we get them to write a bio, and normally most people, probably 5 out of 10, maybe more, avoid it like the plague. They won't do it, right? That's the thing they put off. I've still got a book just recently published for an author. She still hasn't done that bio, and it's, I think, because people get kind of scared. I don't want to talk about themselves, right? Some people don't want to talk about themselves at all. Some people love it, some people don't. Right. And I think authors sometimes do that. And the reality is the bio is not about you. The bio is about who you do, what you do for people. And the best bios in the world are the ones that actually don't really talk about you as such. They might introduce you, but at the end of the day, it's really about how you help people, or how you impact people, or what's about them. And if they can look at that and go, "Oh yeah, that sounds like something I'd like to get involved in," then you go from there, rather than telling where you're born and how all that stuff. They don't really care about that at the end of the day, unless they were born in the same place, then your chances are pretty unlucky.
Exactly. It's a good point. And like you, John, I actually am, I only do it little bits here and there now, but I'm a former publisher. And so I had similar clients who never wanted to write their bio because either they were too scared or it was too cliche to talk about themselves, so they felt guilty about it. Or you're right, they didn't know how to word things to show people how they're solving problems. So I used to change their mindset by asking them one question, and I would say, "How are you saving my world?
Mm.
How are you my superhero with this book, with this message?
Mm.
And then it helped them to start thinking in a different way, as more of solving problems, bringing a message that they really wanted to impact the world. And it was not just a book just for the sake of saying I'm an author. So yeah, it's really good. And I'm glad that you brought up that point.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think they reckon the best public speakers are introverts, because they actually think about the audience. They worry about other people than themselves, right?
True.
And whereas an extrovert will kind of like, it's been more about them and their ego to a degree. And I think that's interesting.
Absolutely.
It's always
Absolutely.
and you hear about these people, even these movie stars and stuff, and you go, oh, they're introverts. They're very shy outside that what they do. They get up on stage and they do their job, and they know their job well. But when they get off stage, they're shy as. They'll sit in a corner and not talk to anybody. So you always make an assumption these people are actually, extroverts when they're not. So with LinkedIn, what do you think is the best way to do lead generation on LinkedIn? Should you just start randomly looking around, or should you really come with some sort of plan to start with?
Very good question. Actually, that was a big lesson that we learned when we had our first really big project, and it was with a Fortune 500 company. And because so many people are involved, we had to be very meticulous, very accountable, very process driven. And what we found was it's much better to build a list beforehand and approve it. So whether let's say you're on a sales team and you're going to create a prospect or target list to pitch to the rest of the team, or if you're doing it for yourself or whatever, it's really good to think of your ideal avatar client. Do no more than 3. Think about the location that you're going to serve. Think about the type of job title they have. Think about the companies you want to work with that are exciting. Don't pitch companies just to pitch them. We should never chase money. Money is just a commodity to provide the basic things in life for us. So what we want to do when we're prospecting is really thinking about who gets me excited. What's their job title? What kind of things would stand out to them on LinkedIn? What would get their attention? When you think like that, then you can start doing your research on LinkedIn. It's super powerful for people who don't take advantage of the search feature. Super, super powerful. It's like a miniature Google. And that way they can start building a list. If they have Sales Navigator, for example, of course they can take advantage of the list feature. Mm-hmm. Or if they use the free version, the search feature is still really powerful, but then they can kind of copy paste names and LinkedIn profiles to a spreadsheet and then look at it globally and then start reaching out. So, the more targeted you can be, the more you understand kind of the psychology of your avatar client, then you can start crafting the messages. You can determine your plan, how many people you're going to reach out to per day, how you're going to really highlight your expertise, and what kind of action you want them to take. Do you want them to book a call with you? Do you want them to come into a lead magnet? It could be going to your website, putting in their email. It could be going to a webinar where you show your expertise. So most people, the mistake they make is they don't think of it as this whole kind of ecosystem.
Like a customer journey we used to talk about.
Exactly. They don't think of it as like, a big thing. They think of it as just, I just search and then I start connect. And either they spam people with those novels that they're sending us messages, or they never send a message at all. So they never create a connection, and they wonder why they're not having a great experience on LinkedIn. So you're right. They have to think more of like a customer journey. It's the beginning of the sales funnel. What should your avatar client go through? And also people need to empower themselves and really think about qualify your avatar client. Because again, if you don't do that, you come off with your energy as very beta, very disorganized, very even sometimes desperate just to make some money. And people can sense that. they can sense that even through a message on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So if you're well organized and you really impress people, you become the prize, as Oren Clough from Pitch Anything says. You should be the prize that the client should win, but that means you have to do your work properly, your homework, your research beforehand in order to position yourself in that way.
And I think that really the nice thing about LinkedIn is it is there. Like you can sit there and you can start researching people, and the offset of that is in Facebook you don't get to know who views the profile, but in LinkedIn it tells you. So the reality, simply by doing research, you're actually generating leads, because what's happening is these people get alerted that you looked at their profile. They go back and look at your profile. And it's like, and I think that's even at a research level. So what's your belief on connecting to people? Because I get these, every so often you get these messages from people. So I don't really connect to anybody I don't know. And so, and I thought, well, gee, how many people do you really know, right? And I limit how many people I connect to. What's your kind of prescription to that? Do you think you should just take anybody on, or do you think you should be really, really particular about who you connect to? Like, what do you think?
I recently had a phone call with somebody who used to live here in Shanghai and runs an entrepreneurs community for women. Mm-hmm. She's now relocated to Los Angeles, and she was saying, yes, I want more visibility on my posts. I want to interact more. So we looked at her LinkedIn profile together, and I said, why do you have less than 600 connections? And you've been running your LinkedIn profile for years. How can you run a female entrepreneur group where the whole idea is to connect, to get opportunities, when you yourself aren't the model of this? And she said exactly what you were asking. She said, oh, but I don't really know people. I don't know if I want to connect. And I said, okay, let's put it this way. If you go to a networking party or a cocktail party, are you going there just to get a martini and stand in the corner and hope that people
talk to people right? That already
right? What if you don't know anyone there? Well, you have to go and you make the effort. You talk to people. That's how you get to know people. It's not like we're 5 years old and it's stranger danger. It's really everybody has value, and you don't know what people can offer you, and you don't know what you can offer other people. There are so many amazing connections I've made through the most random strangers on the internet.
Yep.
Like when I visited Australia last year, and because I run LinkedIn Local in Shanghai, I connected with all the strangers I could in Australia. And then when I visited and I went city hopping, in almost every city I went to, I met those people for a coffee or for a lunch or whatever, and it was the best thing ever. And those people are now part of my professional network. They recommend me to others, whatever. So people need to stop thinking like LinkedIn is Facebook, because again, LinkedIn is not the place where you're sharing your breakfast or you're sharing your kid's 5-year-old birthday. LinkedIn is the place where you're presenting yourself as a professional. You're looking for opportunities. They're looking for opportunities. It's like a big online networking party, and you need to grab your virtual martini and go talk to people. And that's how you really, especially nowadays, that's how business is happening. That's how we get opportunities.
And I think it's interesting because when I was going to networking, one of the things they teach you along the line is it's not the person you know that you meet might help you, it's the person they know.
Exactly.
And so same thing with LinkedIn, you say, like, I came across someone that was like, she's basically connected to me, and I said, her profile didn't really get me, but I thought, oh, okay, she's interesting enough. She wanted to have a conversation. So I have a conversation with her, actually have a Zoom call. And then she starts listing off all the people that she thinks she can connect me with. So she starts connecting me to all these different, very well-known or very active people in LinkedIn that kind of fit within the conversation we just had. So she didn't just go, oh, there's a random bunch of people I'm going to connect you to. She actually thought about it. And in her head, she knew off the top of her head all these connections because she'd spoken to every single one that she'd known on LinkedIn. But and I said to her, in the end, I said, well, is this a service you do or something? She said, no, I just do it because I want to do it. And interesting enough, like I've come across a few other people in there, and she's, oh, I know that person too. Like, it's quite bizarre, right? She's like, she's worked her way through like so many connections, but she had no intention of, no service, nothing. She's just doing it because I think she liked networking. I think she liked talking to people, and I think COVID scenario, same situation, is that Yeah. There's one thing I don't know whether you're aware of, but inside LinkedIn, the mobile version, there's an option that says near me or something. I can't remember exactly. It's a weird looking image in the app, and you click the button, and what it will do is if other people have also clicked that button, it will show everybody in the short vicinity of you. I think it's a few kilometers, maybe something like that.
Yes.
And we've seen it happen at events. And it might be a while before you see live events anymore, but at events where you'd actually get everybody to turn it on, and they could all connect to each other. And I think that's one thing people don't realise is that little thing can sometimes, you can just be in the middle of a city, like you said, like you're in the middle, don't know anybody, turn that on. You never know, you might come across someone that's actually worthwhile talking to. And that's a really neat way to do it. Plus you can generate your own barcode in there as well. So there's a couple of things, and they're not very well talked about, and they look weird. They're just a weird looking button that you would never press. But it's quite fun, and most people don't know about it. So it's interesting. You probably use it in the local scenario, don't you? Like you've probably got people.
Oh, absolutely. I was going to say in the East, it's much more common to use those kind of features.
Mm-hmm.
For people who don't know much about China, we're a QR-based society. Everything we do is, even today, like I went out to pay for a few things, even to get coffee at Starbucks, you just present your phone and there's a QR code and that's how you pay. So for us, when we send a QR code to people in our messaging platform, which is WeChat, people can actually extract the QR code and directly connect to LinkedIn, which is super cool. And then we also are used to scanning each other. We are used to turning on a feature like Near Me. Yeah. And we've done that for our LinkedIn local events when they were in person last year. We also used to run LinkedIn workshops, and we taught people that feature. That way they didn't have to look each other up on their little laptops in the classroom and be like, what's your name again? They just turn it on and then they can add each other right there, or they could get up and walk around and scan each other. So yeah, that's a really cool feature. And I hope it's something that the West will start to embrace more. I think sometimes, depending on different cultures and societies, people get a little leery about that, maybe even more so than adding someone who's a stranger. I think they get scared about like what information is being tracked, etc. But we're always being tracked all the time. So I just say make your life easy and just use it.
The other thing too really is that features you turn on and off at your function, so you don't
Correct.
Not on automatically. You have
That's
to,
right.
Which I think is a good thing. It's not something that you
correct.
If you want to turn it on, you turn it on. It's a bit like Near Me sort of thing. Like as long as you're proving it, then you're in control of what the technology.
Absolutely, very very much so. Yeah.
So what's the jacket? I was looking at that jacket and thinking, that's an interesting jacket you're wearing. Obviously, for people on audio, not going to be able to see this, but on video, you can explain it. But interesting kind of jacket you got going on there.
Yeah, thank you for noticing. I'll sit up a little straighter so you can really see it. So this is our company logo, Genius Encel. And then, of course, here's good old NASA and a rocket launching the space. Our brand motto is skyrocket your business.
Gotcha.
Both my business partner and I, we are total nerds. We love outer space. We like to think that we have a big vision as well, like, Richard Branson or Elon Musk for humanity, and we apply it in a social media and business sense. So we got these cool NASA like knockoff bomber jackets. Being in China, you can get a pretty legit piece for really cheap. And then we designed this, and I sewed it on for us. So it's our company uniform.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think I remember seeing a special on China at one point, and they said at one point when China was that they manufactured 90% of the world's fake goods.
Oh yes. Yeah, no, it's incredible. Like we got this jacket for, I don't know, $20, $25. A fraction of the cost, and then even to get this patch like designed and made, we negotiated the price. You can do that in China, everything's negotiable. And then they sent it within 4 or 5 days.
Nice.
It's incredible. You can get
Mm.
anything here. Super spoiled.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's actually interesting because I've looked at Alibaba and some of the other online platforms sometimes, and you go through everything that's there and think, well, there's so many different ideas that you could use for your own business in terms of giveaways or ways to kind of promote it. That yeah, you are spoilt in that respect because it's right next door to you, whereas sometimes it can take a month or two to get it. So that's the biggest problem I think in Australia is that you order something from China, you might, and nowadays it's even harder, but it could come 3 months later. And so I've
Yes.
forgotten about it by the time you
Yeah,
get it, don't you?
here it's like next day. Sometimes you can
Mm.
order things and it comes within the next hour or two. It's insane.
Mm.
We are very spoiled here.
It's almost like having a giant Amazon that you don't need.
No, it really is. Because yeah, you're right. We have Alibaba, and our version of eBay is called Taobao, and
Hmm.
then we also have another one called JD, Jingdong,
Right.
and you can literally schedule even the day and the time to know that you're going to be home to receive the package. You can track everything. You can even see on your little phone like where the little truck is
Oh,
going
right, it's
from
like an
what
Uber.
province. It's
Right.
insane.
Wow.
Insane.
Yeah. Because I know that Amazon, I think Amazon pulled out of China in the end. I think they tried to get into the Chinese market and then pulled out of it for.
They pulled out because they didn't properly adapt to the particulars of what is the Chinese economy. Whereas other companies, for example, like IKEA, have adapted really well to the Chinese market because IKEA actually tried kind of like Amazon to use their own approach.
Hmm.
But if you list things as like, let's say, cheap goods or DIY, weekend warrior kind of stuff, that does not fit within Chinese culture.
Mm.
Now, because a lot of people are middle class, they're very well educated, they have money to spend, and it's super cheap to hire help. They don't want to go to a store and think about assembling something themselves.
Mm.
They
Mm.
would rather relax on the weekends. So what IKEA did instead was pitch it as like a European brand,
Mm.
European style, so that it
Posh.
seems posh, but they call it affordable.
Yeah.
And if they want, they can hire somebody super cheap to come over, like an old handyman. They're
Yeah.
called a shifu here
Hmm.
in China, and for like $10, you can have your IKEA furniture installed within the hour. So again, like because they understood how to adapt to the Chinese market, they did well. But unfortunately, that Amazon didn't do so well. I think only their ads corporation is still in
Right.
China, still active. Yeah,
I mean, they've come into Australia, but I think that's an interesting point in marketing is that when you go into a market, and it doesn't have to be another country, but assuming that you know anything about the customer until you've actually figured it out is a dangerous thing. And,
correct.
and I think, if you don't eat your own dog food, we say in a scenario, it's like if you don't do your own stuff, then you could end up thinking that you're not even getting the message out because they're not actually ignoring you because of lots of different reasons. And I think even in Australia, because Australia is kind of pretty much Americanized in most cases, that their strategy in Australia will work and
Correct.
will scare the hell out of the retailers because they can't compete with that kind of
Yeah.
branding and that amount of delivery methodology. And I think one of the things with COVID is it's changed the way that things get delivered. Once upon a time, the worst thing in my life was the fact that if someone dropped something at the front of the door, by the time I got there, they'd taken off with it and they didn't get you to sign for it. So that
Right.
you got to get a letter, go get something, go pick it up somewhere, or get them to deliver it the next day, and make sure you're
Right.
home. Now it's the opposite. They put it and they run. Right? It's almost like they don't want to
Exactly.
see you. Right? They just run away. And it's like, did we get
Exactly.
something? And suddenly that
Exactly.
rule, which was, oh, you must sign for it, just disappeared. Right? The
Yeah.
culture completely
Yeah.
changed. I'm hoping it doesn't come back. Because at the end of the day, if you deliver it in a certain place, then, unless it's something really valuable, and maybe that's a different story, but most stuff, as long as you've got a place to safely leave it, then why not leave it there? Like, why do you have to have someone sign for it? And we've got cameras at
Yeah.
the front so we can see what's going on. So yeah, it's kind of bizarre the way that kind of things change because something else
Exactly.
changes
But
in the
consumer
culture.
demand, right? I
Mm.
mean, right now in Los Angeles, for example, there's been a lot of theft actually with Amazon packages.
Mm.
So part of a nationwide strategy and maybe even globally that Amazon started rolling out, which was in tandem actually with COVID. I think they amplified this. They made Amazon lockers so that people could also have a convenient nearby place to have it delivered, whether it was for fear that their stuff would get stolen if they were at work and it got delivered, or just for convenience sake, you know, maybe it's just easier to go pick it up because it's on their way home or whatever. So yeah, and that's what makes Amazon special in the Western market, because they can adapt really well. So I was quite surprised that they didn't really think everything through for the East, but they tried. They were here when I first came to China, and then a year or two later, they, like you said, they pulled out.
Yeah, and I think that's the danger, particularly with incumbents in the size of China. I mean, some smaller countries like Australia is such a small country in comparison. You know, they can practice and they don't spend a lot of money and they can pull out. But
exactly,
in China, it's a big investment and a big infrastructure to build to fail. So,
well, your population of Australia is the population of Shanghai.
And one of the interesting
Isn't that
things
insane?
one of the interesting things about China is that, and I watched a TV special a few years ago when they were talking about the fact that because China buys so much steel from Australia, not so much lately,
right?
But, they built entire cities, and the cities in China that you've never heard of that are bigger than Australia, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's incredible. I mean, even this summer, my business partner and I were keynote speakers. We talked about influencer marketing through LinkedIn at a conference. So we went to this cool city called Ningbo, and it's small in that it only has just over 4 million people. So comparatively, that's pretty small for a China city. And they're super expanding it right now. So there was lots of construction, but they have these massive buildings that almost seem to appear overnight. And what they want to do in order to alleviate all the stress, traffic, pollution from the really big mega cities like Shanghai or Beijing is to entice people to come to these smaller mini mega cities where everything's modern, it's brand new, great schools, great work opportunities, super clean. And they want people to, you know, either permanently like relocate there so that they can alleviate the big city stress, or encourage them at least to commute more for work. So maybe during the week, they live there for work, and then on the weekends they go back to wherever it is. So they're also building these incredible transportation systems, and the fastest bullet trains in the world are all here. I've never seen anything like it until I came to China.
Wow. And I think that the misconception, because you don't see a lot of Chinese news and stuff like that, you don't even know what's going on in China.
Right.
So
Correct.
it's like you don't really know what's going behind the scenes. But I know that, you know, the amount of steel they bought from Australia over time and the cities they were building, the consumption was so massive that, you know, there's so many things getting built. So, So do you think that, and it's not necessarily a political question, but a lot of people, you know, obviously with COVID and stuff like that happened. Did Shanghai get affected by COVID? Was it something that they closed off too quickly to stop that from happening? I mean, we never really found out whether, you know, the big city like Shanghai would have been affected by something like COVID.
Right. So actually, Shanghai, I don't know. I think it's just a really lucky, really blessed city. Even when we have typhoon weather like right now, it never gets super impacted. And it was the same with COVID. I think they acted fast enough as far as a really large city could do. So they closed the city off completely when we were right at the kind of precipice of watching the numbers go up. But here's what people who are outside of China should know, and this is particular and special to most Asian societies, especially China. When the government tells you to do something,
you do it.
But more than that, when you're told it's for the greater good, because it's a collective society, and it's the same in Japan and Korea. When you're told that it's for the greater good, it really is all for one and one for all. So everyone stayed inside. They all did their part, and that's why we were able to flatten the curve so quickly. And even still now, like the The only new cases have all been imported of people slowly trickling back in from overseas. There's no new domestic cases. And yet, even though you can go outside with total freedom, we can eat in restaurants, the businesses have restarted, people still wear masks. And that, again, too, is part of Asian society. We are asked to wear masks, like in the metro or public transportation. Anytime you take a taxi or like an Uber, that's when we wear a mask as well. But other than that, we were pretty lucky. Like, we were never hit hard, and we all worked from home. We all did our part. And because of that, it really helped to scale my business more this year, because, like I said, people's attention online became the highest it's ever been in the history of mankind.
And I think the biggest thing that people that I found was that Zoom, to a certain number of people, and particularly with some of the publishing stuff, we'll have a coffee. And I always reckon that was the biggest waste of time ever.
Yes,
go, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, and I hate the thing. So let's have a virtual coffee instead, right?
Yes.
Doing here. In fact, I've got a coffee cup here. See, look at that.
Amazing.
And so people were more open to it then. Like, they were actually wanted to do it, in comparison before, where you could sort of, and then because the online webinars and things like that sort of picked up a bit too. So I think the whole IT thing got a kick boot that was starting to fall away a bit, I think. But people were too focused on events and stuff like that. So I think it's a good thing that people have, because it's so much time is wasted. Like, I live outer city in Sydney, so it takes me a good 45 minutes to an hour to get into the city if I'm lucky, right?
Wow.
And so they'd have it, and they'd always be in the city, almost guaranteed they'd be in the city. And so they come in for a coffee, so they'd come in, and I said, that's half a day gone for me.
Exactly.
By the time I get there, get back, and then of course I'll come back in the afternoon, I get hit by traffic, that's 3 hours return. And it's like crazy, and I could have met 10 people in that period of time. So I think using it as a tool to have those quicker conversations, I think is so much better on Zoom. In fact, I've got a podcast interview I did for somebody that was interesting. They have decided to meet at least one person a day, and have a conversation on Zoom with them for a year.
Wow.
So, in fact, they're actually, from what I can see, they're talking to more than one person today. So they just set up a Zoom call, you have a chat with them for about 15, 20 minutes or something, and then they noted in their LinkedIn profile that they've had a chat with, whoever about something. And then they circled back and they did podcast interviews with including me, with some of the people they spoke to. Obviously, some people weren't relevant or whatever. Right. They run an Adelaide networking club where people go to networking.
Cool.
Because their business got decimated because of this.
Wow.
And they pivoted, and they actually started to meet people online, but they never tried to sell you anything. They just genuinely wanted to meet as many people as they could online. It was just an interesting kind of way. So swinging back for a second, if you were starting new, and even if you're in a new city, what were the first couple of things you do on LinkedIn to kind of get started, to get them off the ground and get moving with it, rather than just kind of go, I've got all these options to do, what do I do, right? What's the kind of 2 or 3 things you think they should probably focus on?
I think first is really kind of like prospecting, no matter what you're doing. Prospecting to find maybe people who are in a similar industry, so that when you relocate or you go to a new city you're visiting, you're able to have people with some kind of common ground. I think that really helps a lot. So for example, when I first came to Shanghai, I didn't use LinkedIn the way I do now, but I used meetup.com, and I found other writers because I'm a published writer. So that's kind of how I started to actually get into the Shanghai entrepreneur scene, because one connection led to another. So I think that would be definitely something to do, and have a good process about it. And then the other would be, I think definitely the old ways was going to networking events. But now that things are different, I would say for people to find kind of an online community. So it could be a LinkedIn group, it could be a meetup group. Lots of people are hosting kind of like big Zoom sessions, or they'll do have a wine talk. There's like an influencer in one of our groups, our community for LinkedIn Local, and she is known as the wine lady. That's how she's branded herself. She's precious. And she does these like wine chats. So I think she called it like tipsy talk or something. So people just keep pouring the wine bottle while she's teaching them about wine, and they're all drinking and they love it. So I think that's kind of going to be the new way for people to get settled, whether they're going somewhere new to relocate, or they're just looking, if they have the luxury of traveling to a new city or whatever. I think that's going to be more of kind of the future. So those would be my two biggest tips.
And I think the thing is that, time gone past, like you couldn't do that. You'd have to go and join. Like for me, I play squash like 5 times a week. So if I play squash, immediately after probably a month, I've got 200 or 300 new friends. But that's a lot of work, right?
Right.
Like squash.
Right. Yeah.
I play 5 times a week, so I know almost everybody in that club. There's probably about 400 or 500 members ultimately, but I pretty much know everyone because I play there virtually every night.
Wow.
And so they know who I am, right? But in that situation on LinkedIn, there's so many people out there that have no clue. So I think being really tight on who you are and what you are, and then focusing on those kind of people, I think is the key. And I think that kind of idea of just having conversations with people and with no real intent was an interesting, cute way of kind of getting yourself established in LinkedIn. Because what will happen is you'll talk to somebody and then they'll refer to someone else. So you should talk to that person, and people like to help, right? So I think if you just, probably the laziest way, because I talk about lazy marketing.
Yeah, I like that.
2020 is all about lazy marketing for me. So it's like if you do something lazy and it works, and you can do more of it, right? But if it didn't work when you did it in the lazy way, it's probably not going to work because you have to work too hard.
Correct.
So my theory is, well, if you make it a lazy way, let's try to do it lazy way. So to me, that's kind of a lazy way because I've automated you would have noticed when you booked a call, I've automated the whole thing. So at the end of the day, when somebody connects with me, the first time I know about it is when I see an email saying they've booked a time. That's it.
Perfect.
And I think that's probably the key to it in my respect. Like you talked earlier about call to actions.
Yeah.
For us, we always say, look, you want a conversation, here's how you do it. Not, are you free? That drives me insane when I go, are you free at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning? When? What country? What time zone? What?
Right. Now, your process organization is very impressive, John. I was really, really impressed. Out of all the podcasts I've been on, I think you have one of the most outstanding, but also really qualifying process. So well done for that.
Thank you, because I've learnt my lesson over time. But one of the things that we actually started, that platform that you went through, is that something we actually wrote. So it's our whole platform that we developed. And we're actually building up we just finished building a podcast platform as part of that, and part of that's a guest process. Because I think that's the thing that I've noticed when people go through a guesting process. I've been through a few, and between the Google Docs and the emails that go on, drives me insane trying to just manage that. So I thought, what was the fastest way to solve a problem in terms of a guest? Make it easy for them, easy for me. And in my preparation, I don't have to spend a lot of time kind of trolling through emails. It's all there in one place. So I think
exactly. Good for you. Very smart. And we do the same with all of our processes for business. So from one process-driven person to another, well done.
Kindred spirit, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I always have to say, if you can't automate it, you can't scale it. And so if you got to sit there and push it every time, then it'll never work.
That's right.
It'll fail, something along the lines, because your staff will fail you in that situation because they'll forget that little extra step. Yeah, cool. So I think we originally spoke about you doing a mastermind event. Is that something that you said was coming up soon, or is that something you regularly do?
Yeah, so twice a month, my business partner and I do a LinkedIn masterclass. Where we focus a little bit on optimizing a profile, which I think was good for everyone.
Yep.
But more than that, we focus more on how to not suck at content creation, and also how to be consistent and target well when you're prospecting, which I think is probably the biggest value. So so if people are interested in that, they can find me on LinkedIn and check it out, sign up.
Cool. We'll put the
from
link
there
up
from one of my posts.
For them so they can find you. So It's really interesting to talk to you. I could probably talk about LinkedIn for hours.
Definitely.
I think it's the most underutilized, tool in the business marketplace.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's not that hard to do once you get into it, but I think people just like put that barrier. Oh, it looks too hard to me. I'm not touching it.
You're right.
I think it's so underutilized, and I think it's certainly going to change the way business is done. I think if it, because the reality is when you look at it, I don't know how many active users of LinkedIn now. There's probably at least 300-400 million. I don't know, but you look at that and you look at the numbers of Facebook. Say there's like 4 billion people on Facebook, whatever it is.
Right.
And you think, but there's a lot of business people out there. There's so much further it could go. Probably half those people are recruiters in LinkedIn anyway, right? So.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, the business people, it's almost a fresh market for someone to go after because there's not many people out there actually approaching people on LinkedIn anyway.
LinkedIn is basically like Facebook was in 2012. The organic reach is still super high. There's so much value and benefit. And what Facebook never had was the power of natural filtering. If you are sharing your breakfast on LinkedIn, you're going to become a pariah instantly in the professional community.
You do, right? Anything.
Want to see your oatmeal and, lattes. So that's what's the most powerful about LinkedIn. And people definitely need to use it.
They cut you quick, right?
That's right.
You get away with it. You get it on Facebook. You won't get away on LinkedIn.
That's right. That's right.
So really, really grateful for you coming along, and it's
Thank you.
And maybe we'll talk again soon. Again, something about the latest LinkedIn's happening.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me, John. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.